So, thanks for joining. And this is our first career development seminar series for this cycle. So it's
Oh,
really good to see everyone. And for our inaugural, career development seminar for this cohort, I really am honored to introduce our speaker. She's our GloCal Fellow alumnus. So I'm going to make a quick introduction and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Onono, and then she'll share her experience. So forgive me, I need my reading glasses nowadays. Okay, so Dr. Maricianah Onono, she's a senior principal clinical research scientist at the Kenya Medical Research Institute, also known as KEMRI, and one of Kenya's few research psychiatrists. She holds an MBCHB and MMED in psychiatry from the University of Nairobi, MSc in clinical research from the University of Liverpool, and a PhD in global health sciences from UC San Francisco. So, as a proud alumnus of the GloCal Fellowship, she has built a remarkable career spanning over 17 years, leading nearly 40 implementation science and clinical trials and authoring over 100 publications. Her work focuses on the intersection of HIV, reproductive health, and mental health for adolescent girls and young women. Dr. Onono's exceptional career spans from the frontline community and clinical research to high-level institutional leadership, having served as acting director of scientific programs, partnerships, and grants management at KEMRI, where she oversaw over 7 billion Kenyan shilling, which I believe it's like close to 54 million US dollars. It's a huge portfolio and over 220 international collaborations. So we're very, very honored to have Dr. Onono share with us her experience. Um, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Mariciana, Dr. Onono, and then typically we'll have probably like 40 minutes, 35 to 40 minutes, probably like 40 minutes for you to share, and then we can spend the rest just informal Q&A session. So I'll turn the floor over and welcome and thank you.
thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. And it's really great to be here. I believe, Kimberly, if I'm not wrong, I think I was in the first cohort.
Yes, that's correct. Right. Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, yeah, I was in the first cohort. So I'm going to share my journey and the lessons I've learned about building a career in research. And this sentence sort of like captures my entire career path. I started in the clinical field, focused on individual patients, and then moved into research. Later on, I moved into national leadership roles, though I did step down a month ago, where I could shape systems and policies. But my mission really has always been the same, to be able to use science to improve outcomes for people and populations. So as I said, I started clinical work. I trained as a medical doctor. Then an off chance call with Professor Elizabeth Bukusi, who I think you all know, asking me to come and step in for 3 months as a locum, began my research career. I met Craig Cohen, who looked at me and told me, "You've got the mind of a researcher. Have you ever considered what it is?" And I never even thought about it. In Kenya, here, being a researcher meant that you do not have the brains to be a serious doctor. And so it was not really on my cards for me in terms of becoming a researcher, but I ended up staying. Predominantly was doing became a study coordinator for some of the work that was being done by Professor Cohen, together with Professor Bukwesi. Also did my master's around the same time, and then transitioned to be a little bit to independence, writing smaller grants, predominantly between 2013 and 2019. I was a co-investigator, writing smaller grants. I also did my PhD at the UCSF during this time. And upon coming back, I think that's when I really settled back into my role as a PI. I do run the Cambridge Cargano Research and Policy Hub. I'm the PI and the director for the site. I have about 120 120 staff who work for me. We've collectively we've done about 30 multi-site trials, and our grant portfolio is currently at about 50 million US dollars. I am hoping that in my journey, you realize that we are pluripotent. When we were in medical school, we used to be told that we are pluripotent stem cells. We come from one single cell and then we become into many things, hair, bone, teeth, blood, just from one. And I'm hoping that in speaking about my journey, you can realize that you don't need to really stick to one thing, that there's a lot of pathways that you can take in research, a lot of areas um, that you can dive into, and that your path does not need to be linear as it is. Oh, where's my move button? There. Yeah. So this T-shaped model is the framework I'll be using today. The vertical bar represents your expertise, what you know as a scientist, what makes you unique. And the horizontal bar represents the broader skills and allows you to apply that expertise at scale. And both are really essential for both resilience and impact. I think that sometimes as scientists, we tend to really go down the rabbit hole of science and forget about the other skills that we need, whether it's in administration, whether it's in negotiations, whether it's in creating partnerships, but both are actually important. But let's start first with the fundamentals, these essential skills that you require in order to be a good researcher. And these are the three fundamentals that have shaped my career as a researcher. One is the grant writing to secure resources. And then second, you have the publications to build a scientific voice, and then also time management to stay productive as responsibility grows, because inevitably your responsibility is going to grow. And mastering this early on in your career creates a good foundation for everything that you do, and has been beneficial to me. And I know sometimes that grant writing can be quite daunting, but I think just starting with, a small piece, plugging in with more senior investigators and saying, can I write the method section? Can I write the analytical sections? Can I do for you the literature review? I think begins to help you flex that particular muscle. And especially for researchers who are coming from LMIC, sometimes our training in terms of writing is not as good, and it can be very daunting to write a whole proposal on your own. And so just starting with the smaller bits, what can I do to plug in into the large teams? You don't need to start from the top, but you can start somewhere. So early on in my career, I learned the importance of not putting all my eggs in one basket. So the importance of diversification of the grants that you're writing, so that when one funding stream faces challenges, others can sustain your work. And so this pie chart is just currently sort of like showing my current grant portfolio. And the reason why it's good to diversify is I think it gives you some level of resilience. So, for example, earlier on this year, with the new Trump administration, it cut a lot of the global health funding. Many programs stalled or, shut down. But because we had a fairly well-balanced portfolio, we were affected, but we were not crippled. And so being able to diversify those funders, and I find that because most of our mentors tend to come from the US and GloCal is US, we tend to sort of like narrow everything to the NIH. My encouragement to you is to explore other funders out there. I've had successful funding from WHO, from UNICEF, from industry. Doesn't need to be trials. They have investigator initiated grants, which you're able to, literally solicit them to fund other universities outside of the US. Foundations such as the Gates, I think, have been generous, but there are also other foundations which are good for early career people. The Wellcome Trust is good, Soros is good. So there are other people who are funding beyond the NIH. So I think sometimes I think the focus ends up being looking for the US-based funding, sticking to the NIH. My encouragement is from the get-go, try and get a bit of a balanced portfolio so that you do not get crippled I guess life happens, for lack of a better English word. I put in this thing because when we were, well, when we are dating, we are often told, socialize, don't specialize, get to know what everybody's doing. So that would be my advice regarding grants as well. So the other thing about writing is that you really need to be able to tell a cohesive story. Your research needs to tell a compelling stories, and funders want to invest in researchers who've got a clear progressive vision. Where are you going? Show us where you're going. And what I wanted to show in this particular slide is that strong grant writing isn't just about individual proposals. The story needs to be able to tell a narrative. So on the left, I talk about my evolving research. So I started with the MAMA study, which is looking at stigma and ANC and how stigma affects integrated ANC and HIV access. And then this naturally then led to investigating integration of HIV services into antenatal care services, as well as family planning and HIV services at the systems level. And then this eventually led to the ECHO study, which was more of a clinical trial looking at the impact of hormonal contraception on HIV acquisition. And then from there, I moved into community systems. So looking at integrated community case management. And this was really my first large work as an independent PI. And ironically, I know it's, I'm already with the mothers, but this sounds like it's child health. This work actually arose from my work in family planning and just, when you're in the community and then beginning to realize that women cannot contracept if they're losing babies. And so I took a detour into child health because I wanted them to take up the family planning, but I could not assure them. I remember one woman asking me, "Can you assure me my daughter will reach your age?" I was 30 at that time, and I couldn't give her that guarantee. And so then I took a detour into child health and community systems to try and keep the babies alive, And so I leveraged community health workers and digital innovation, and then this led to additional work, which for an NIH grant for Motivate, which looked at digital innovations to decrease mother-to-child transmission, and also developed MXS, which was around. Hello? Okay. Yeah, which was sort of like creating like an Uber-like transport system to get women to health facilities. In all these things, I was leveraging my experience working with the community. And I think working at the community level really opens your eyes to the structural determinants of health. And then this led us to begin addressing aspects such as water and food insecurity through works around Pith Moromo and the P Ngema. And then COVID happened. So when COVID happened, we had to pivot. People are now looking for people who had got skills in doing clinical trials, and automatically I became eligible. So at that time, we began doing a lot of vaccine clinical trials for COVID, for RSV, and for human papilloma virus. And there was a lot of mental health stuff going on also around that same time. So I pivoted again and began doing mental health and social support platforms. So we've got two Arowans, Tunawiri and the Vijana Shamba Maisha work that's ongoing. I think this is just to show you, first of all, that there's research ideas all around you, but to also be careful around what is the story that your grants are showing, and how do they tie to each other. So as you can see, each grant is really building on the previous one. But beyond just the different grants, I also sort of like improved my skills. So I came from a heavy quantitative and epi background, and that's where I began. So then moved on to the implementation science. And because we're asking more and more questions and collaborating with more people, we began to also explore what are the biological mechanisms, and then also move to the clinical trials and vaccine trials. So you can see that then the science is not just epi, it's not just incidents, it's not just implementation science, it's a more broader piece, even as I have continued to grow. And then on the right side is really has been about being deliberate about prioritizing mentorship through a structured pathway. And I have used what happened to me, beginning in as a study coordinator, and then having the study coordinators graduate to co-Is, to co-PIs, and for them to become independent PIs. And this approach has helped my mentees to be able to secure their own funding, to publish independently, and to also step into leadership roles. I find that by mentoring and having people who are just as capable as you, it's not really about competition, but about being able to multiply yourself. So this here is around publications, and I sort of like went through some of the questions which you said you were interested, so that guided this presentation. So we all know publications are currency in academia, but I think that their real value is in their impact. You have to look beyond just the papers for the numbers' sake. And policymakers are really looking out for good quality. Good quality evidence. And so this slide basically summarizes how I think about publications, not really as an isolated output, but as a strategic tool for building my scientific identity and for driving policy impact. So while I have 106 publications, probably not where I would want to be, I think I slowed down at some point because I was trying to be intentional about what am I putting out there. My goal has always just been depth, consistency, and purpose. I try to average at least 4 publications every year. The themes for my work have been in the areas which I'm passionate about, so SRH, HIV, community systems, and mental health, and being able to tell that coherent story. I try that my publications should speak to each other. And I think when you look at the bio sketches, it always asks you, what's your contribution to science? AKA, what story are you really telling with the work that you're doing? And so you need to be clear about that story. But also similar to how I diversified the kind of grants that I was doing, your public over time should be able to show progression. So I have evolved from describing problems because that's where you start out. When you have a small grant or you're a co-I, on a smaller grant, sometimes that's all you do. All you can do is describe the problem. And I think my first publication was about PDAs. These were handheld devices which were used to collect data. And then over the years, then my publications have moved to, testing feasible solutions, evaluating whether it's biological or behavioral mechanisms, and finally to being able to inform scale up. And I think this is what demonstrates a true program of science, not just scattered papers here and there. And then also being keen about moving from paper to policy. So a lot of the work that has done has been able to contribute to the national policies on family planning and HIV integration. We have informed the WHO HIV family planning guidance. We recently influenced the WHO's guidance on moving to single-dose HPV vaccination from a 7-year cohort that I have been overseeing. We have changed the Kenya pneumonia's guidelines from the work I talked about, the small detour I took into child health. Changed the Kenya pneumonia guidelines. I also changed the ICCM and community health policy, and was actually the foundation for a lot of the community health program and the public health networks that Kenya is now rolling out, or just rolled out last year. And then also similar to grants again for my mentorship and productivity. I have given the mentees to take a first authorship role, and I take the senior authorship. And I think that this not only builds capacity, but also accelerates career. And I know you're going to be building things for yourself. This is really great in terms of being able to retain your staff, because you do want to retain your staff to stay with. You can't keep on training them all the time, and so some of these things are simple motivators that you can use to maintain your staff. I then also took a little detour which really taught me about the importance of mastering my time. So in 2021, I was called up to step in as the acting director for scientific programs, partnerships and grants management in KEMRI. This is the largest portfolio in KEMRI, which covers about 70% of KEMRI's 70% of what KEMRI does in terms of budget, science, and HR. It was supposed to be a short stint of 6 months that went on for about 3 years. And this, I think that the scale of responsibility was overwhelming. And my biggest lesson was that time really becomes your most valuable resource. And this chart just shows how my time had to be redistributed across the five major, responsibilities. I had 7 research programs that I was overseeing, over 200 partnerships, mobilizing grants and serving as government liaison, both locally and internationally, as well as implementing organizational reforms. And I think the thing which kept me going, I think, was just sort of like learning how to prioritize. And I think I'm grateful for my mentors who, from an early age, really emphasized being able to schedule for the things which may not be urgent, but they are important. And so this simple matrix that you see here is how I've managed to manage my time. Most of our work, the high value work actually, the writing, the thinking, the planning, usually falls in important but not urgent, And so if you're not careful, if you're not protecting that time, then it won't happen, and you really must schedule it. And I remember early on in my career, Prof. Cohen being very emphatic about, oh, you must schedule a minimum of 1 day a week just to write, and whether that 1 day looked like 6 hours on one day and then 6 hours on another day, but he was deliberate about ensuring that no matter what was going on in my life, I needed to schedule in a minimum of 1 day a week. Of course, over time, this has changed. I have scheduled 2 days a week, which everybody knows you don't touch her Tuesdays and you don't touch her Thursdays, as days when I have, is just focused purely on writing. So encouraging you that when as life happens, to know that the writing work, the manuscripts, the grant writing, you really need to be able to schedule that. And so on the top left, I do only what must happen immediately. So critical grants and urgent stakeholder meetings, those ones I would take them. Then any other things which are operational, doesn't need my hand, that goes down to the team. And so I think that, I don't know, when I was in UCSF, they had this whole thing about a training on scientific leadership and how to build teams and choosing teams. So to be careful to get the support that you require. Often we focus so much upwards on who's mentoring, who we want to shadow, who we want to partner with, and we pay less attention to the support team that you build around you, and that team can really make or break you. So I think just being careful about who you're bringing aboard, how you're treating them, how you're retaining them, because then you're able to delegate quite a bit to them. So now I'll move on to the second part of my presentation. And this is really about building resilience. Yeah, so your ability to adapt and thrive even when circumstances change. When I came into research, Professor Bukusi told me 2 things. One, research requires stamina. And it's a long game. If you're looking for a quick win, you will not get it in research. And it's a person who finishes. What did she say? Well, the person who finishes who wins the prize. And so you really have to hang in there. It's a deeply rewarding career, but you have to really sort of like hang in there, be ready to adapt, and uh, and know when it's time to repackage your skills and to move on to the next level. So I wanted to just give two examples around navigating shifts because you will be thrown, curveballs. Right now some things are not fundable, sometimes are not fundable. The funding has shifted. Some areas have been deprioritized. So then how do you navigate those? Um, Shifts. And I think I've talked about pivoting, when opportunities arrive. So I think that we have the capacity, as I said, we are pluripotent to repackage ourselves. And repackaging really doesn't mean that you're starting over. It means that you're taking what are your core competencies and applying them to the new challenges. And so this slide is basically just showing how I've used a little bit of repackaging throughout my career to stay relevant and to keep growing. So, for example, with my experience in leading women's health trials, so I first used this, when we were doing the contraceptive safety trial for ECHO, to the 3-year study. And when the landscape shifted, then I used that same experience from the ECHO trial to then run to become the PI for the Kenshi HPV vaccine efficacy trial. The other one would be my shift to psychiatry, which I've come into much, much later in my career, actually post PhD. I also learned that sometimes growth requires us to go deeper. And so I saw that mental health was missing among the adolescent girls and young girls who we were seeing. So I made then the strategic decision that I'm going back to medical school for psychiatry. And this move to psychiatry then opened up this entirely new scientific and funding pathways. We have actually 3 NIH grants arising from that particular pivot. And I think these examples show that you can always reframe yourself and do not shy away from starting anew. Um, so I'll just rush over this because I think I'd mentioned a little bit. I think that sometimes as researchers, we see administrative roles as distractions from real science. But I actually found after I had accepted the role that the opposite is actually true. And it does allow you to understand how institutions work, how policies are made, how resources flow. And this actually makes you to be a much more effective scientists. I think that it really opens doors in terms of amplifying your scientific impact, understanding some of the systems that exist within governments to get things done. And I think that personally, I felt that it grew me professionally and personally. It stretched me and forced me to think at scale. So I was not just thinking about this grant that I have, this R34, 21, R1, you're actually thinking at a much higher level. And I think that there is benefit in that. So when those opportunities come knocking, my encouragement is please do not shy away from them. I'll skip over this. So this slide basically shows how my work, following both my experiences in clinical as well as in senior administration, does has had. So extending beyond research outputs, I've been able to be a member of national technical working groups, so influencing guideline revisions, government negotiations, engaging the counties. And so I have moved from not just generating evidence to shaping the systems that use it, And I know we normally have this section in our grants which are asking us what will be the impact, how will you get this to be uptaken into policy? And I think that exposure allows me to talk about it better. And even after I step down, I feel like that influence and the connections that I made hasn't reduced. And in fact, I think it's expanded because now there's less bureaucracy. I think this was just to encourage you not to shy away from those roles. I wanted to just talk a little bit about my science. So I think I had talked about it. So my first contribution to science has been evidence for community health. I've been able to provide evidence on the role of community health workers in strengthening the community health systems in Kenya. We have demonstrated that community health workers can safely and effectively deliver essential services like treating childhood pneumonia, malaria, diarrhea in the community. We've expanded now to family planning as well as mental health support. And I think there's just a deep satisfaction in seeing your work being referenced as some of what was used to guide those decisions. My second contribution to science has been around innovation for access, so digital innovation. I think I talked earlier about developing a mobile-based platform to improve adherence and retention among women living with HIV. We have been able to use mobile phones to enhance integrated community case management delivery. And it's interesting because when this was finally rolled out in Kenya nationally, they did provide the community health workers with forms, with phones and programmed in all the applications inside it. And then we've also been able to um, uh, provide expertise in the design, implementation, and evaluation of digital health interventions and electronic data management systems. I think what I like most about this work is how we've been able to provide practical solutions to care. My third and growing contribution to science has been around mental health. So we've been able to identify mental health as a critical gap. We are currently only about 160 psychiatrists for a population of 50 million. In Kisumu, where I work, we are just three of us who are psychiatrists. And in Kemri, we are only two research psychiatrists. So we've been able to identify this as a critical gap and are beginning to address this. We've been able to lead integration studies, the Tatua and the Tunariri work, which is looking at practical models for embedding mental health screening, task shifting, counseling, risk stratification, and even just provision of treatment across a stepped care collaborative model. I think that we are beginning to define a new subspecialty. I think a lot of the time when you think about reproductive psychiatry, we are only just thinking about the reproductive period, but also beginning to expand, looking at SRH and looking at mental health and how they begin to intersect. And lastly, I think one of my other contributions has been around understanding the political landscape in as far as it concerns research. Sometimes the most important question isn't really what works, but why isn't it working? And here we've been able to use political science tools to understand why adolescent health is chronically underprioritized in our settings. So we've been able to apply political science frameworks to examine why this is just, we know the burden. An adolescent, for example, pregnancy is contributing to about a fifth of our total fertility rate, but we are just not doing anything about it. And so we've examined the competing definitions for adolescent pregnancy. We've looked at the different arenas where this is getting discussed and trying to understand why it's not just getting much traction. And I think that this work that we've done highlights the importance of just understanding that evidence alone doesn't drive policy, politics does. And so we must be willing and open to get our hands dirty and to also speak the language which the politicians are speaking. And so I'm back to this T-shaped model of ours. So I think now you can see how my experience over time maps onto this framework. So the vertical bar represents the years that I have spent, honing my scientific skills. So I have gained mastery in trials, in HIV prevention, in mental health, and in community system. And this is your anchor for you. The sense that you have will always be your anchor. And then the rest is the horizontal represents what happens when you begin to step beyond your discipline, learning how institutions work, how to influence policy, how to shape, the grant systems, including, what calls are people pulling out of there and being able to negotiate partnerships. And this is what really stretches you beyond your own projects. Um, there was a question there about job searches and preparations. This is just broad. I think there's much to be. I think that can be a whole like session in its own. But I think that, when you're preparing for job interviews or writing applications, I think just to remember how you frame that it's just not listing what you have done, but describing the impact of what you did, which is back to what I was talking about earlier, that what is your body of science. And so that it's not just a list of jobs, it's a story of impact and the rising impact for that particular matter. So if I talk about the work that I did, I did conduct a study on family planning, HIV integration, but the real impact is that I generated evidence that shaped the national FPHIV integration toolkit and trained the providers across 47 countries. So just being able to repackage and see your work from an impact lens. So as I draw to a close, if you forget anything I have said, I think I remember these four principles. They have guided me through every phase of my career. One, just be strategically curious. Look beyond your project. I think, as you heard me speak, there are questions all around you, and there's nothing stopping you from doing slight shifts and coming back. So look beyond your project. Be curious. Understand the ecosystem. What's the policy? What's the financing? What are the partnerships there? And it's that curiosity that opens doors. The statement about, women cannot, a WHO guy had me saying that women cannot contracept if they're losing babies. And he asked me, what are you going to do about it? And he challenged me to write a proposal like on December the 30th. And he wanted it by, he wanted it by January 7th. And I did. And he ended up funding me like 3 million US dollars, and it was just, it does open doors. Two, diversify your portfolio, build multiple skills, multiple funders. Um, and this will give you some shocks, so protection against some of the shocks that come and keeps you adaptable. So different funders, different areas, long projects, short projects, diversify your portfolio. And then lead from where you are. And I believe that leadership isn't a title. It's ownership, it's mentorship, it's systems thinking, and being able to show that you can move things forward from any seat wherever you are. And then lastly, protect your purpose. Because when you're brilliant, like you are, like when you've gotten this, you're in the GloCal Fellows, you're brilliant. People know you're brilliant. They're able to pull you in all manner of directions, and you have to really guard your why, and prioritize the work that aligns with your values and long-term mission. And that's what will give you the staying power or the stamina that Professor Bukusi was speaking about. You have to be intentional about about protecting your purpose. Yeah, so as I wrap up, I think that this is really the heart of the matter. Your reputation is your most valuable asset. It's what will open doors long after any single grant has ended. It's what will keep guys inviting you to collaborate or giving you opportunities. So I want to thank you all and to also acknowledge, as Maya Angelou says, I come as one, but I stand as 10,000. I have truly stood on the shoulders of many, many, many mentors, as well as a great support team to be able to reach here. Thank you.
Wow, what a wonderful and inspirational journey that you shared with us, Dr. Onono. This was great, and thank you for finishing on time. And I think we have at least like over 10 minutes to reflect on your journey and also ask questions. Really appreciated your response and I mean your experience. So I'll start with like what really struck out to me. One of the main things, but I think as fellows start their career and they're thinking about academic promotions and merit increases. We often, and you also brought up in the early days, you really protected your time for generating, developing publications. But I think right now, a lot of folks are balancing, research, but also, having like duty to provide service. And
Hmm.
I think where you are right now, you are such an institutional leader, and sometimes you have to balance between research and service. And I think the paradigm is shifting a little bit to really value service.
Hmm.
But I think early in your career is sometimes difficult to really appreciate the opportunities for like community service or other types of service. So how do you
Hmm.
navigate um, those decisions when you're offered to serve on something versus like advancing your academic career in terms of research?
So at the beginning, I think I was very
Hmm.
selfish.
Hmm. Hmm.
I think I was very selfish. I focused more on uh, what was advancing my career, and I did not
Yeah.
take on additional responsibilities until I was established. I think that in stepping into, like, for example, like the administrative role, it would not
Hmm.
have been possible if I didn't have a team under me that was supporting me.
Gotcha.
Um, I think that it is, I did focus a lot on the research, the writing, both publications as well as grants, at the expense of perhaps clinical service. And I actually did
Hmm.
stop clinical practice
Hmm.
at
Hmm.
one particular
Right.
point.
Yeah.
And I think it was during my PhD, I sitting in one class and being reminded that it's the patients and community that grounds us.
Hmm.
Otherwise, they are just statistics. And that took me back.
Hmm.
So then now I am more intentional about the same intentionality I have around protecting my 2 days a week for my research publications and grants. I also have like a dedicated day where I must work in clinic or work in the community, and then the rest is up for grabs. Yeah. But I think that when you're starting out earlier,
Hmm.
you have to be selfish around, you know,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, the things that also move you forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. This is your opportunity to ask difficult questions for Dr. Onono. Don't be shy. Okay, so there's a Peter says, socialize, do not specialize. How do I keep focus into becoming an independent researcher scholar? What is your say about developing a niche? Yeah.
Mm. I think that, and I say that, socialize, do not specialize at the
Mhm.
beginning because you're trying to get a broad experience in research.
Mhm.
And so my approach was that I didn't specialize in one thing. As I grow now, I'm honing down on the integration of SRH and mental health. That's where I'm sort of like sitting now. But at the beginning, whatever opportunities opened up for me, I considered them as long as there was a story to it. Is how, you look at the long arch of it. Does it build on something that I'm doing? So it might look like it's diverse, but it's really not that diverse. If I'm doing community systems, I can apply that same community-based research on child health. I can do it in family planning. I can apply it in mental health as we are doing right now in maternal health. So what are the joining dots? So it's not scattered. You're
Mhm.
socializing, but still with intentionality. It's
Yeah.
not really scattered. You have to keep remembering what story am I telling by the work that I'm choosing to engage. And I think that over time, you realize the things that you're good at. Like I had to step back. When I came back from my PhD to look at what is my current narrative saying regarding
Mhm.
what I'm doing, and I analyzed all my papers and I realized I have, even though mental health was something which I had downplayed, it was 70% of my portfolio.
Mhm.
And so I realized that I've created a good enough narrative, a strong enough narrative and reputation in this to take this forward, and began now to drop off the things which I'm not very, very keen on. But I think that earlier on in your career, take the opportunity to not specialize, to be
Mhm.
as broad as possible, not just in terms of the topic area, but also the methods that you're using for your research.
Mhm.
So beyond the qualitative going into quantitative going into the qualitative. If you're an epi person, you can still come down and even look at biological mechanisms. Don't be in silos. Be broad about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And then, so Peter asked, paper to policy, how does that start? How does one start? And then after that, I think Anne has a question for you, Anne Martin.
Yeah, well, I think it depends on where you are in your career. As I said at the beginning, the papers which are coming to you, you're just building the muscle of writing,
Mhm.
especially for us who come from LMICs, we don't write at all. So first just building that
Mhm.
particular muscle. So, I began with descriptive work, but over time, as you become an investigator on your own, always start as you're writing your grant, you're writing it with the end in mind. How does this influence policy? Even if it's just contributing some data point to that policy, so that when you eventually get the paper writing, you had already structured your grant with the methods and the questions to be able to allow you to work on that to impact policy. And the reality is that policymakers are looking for that evidence. They're looking for high quality evidence. Who's generating that particular evidence. I remember when I was coming in for my PhD, this work we began doing for eco work, and we were trying to change our national guidelines for family planning, and people were like, "Oh, she's doing the research on this," and so they held for 3 years when I was doing my PhD, the change of guidelines are waiting for this
Mhm.
study to get completed to generate high quality evidence. But you have to start with the end in mind.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And Anne?
Thanks. And thanks so much, Dr. Nono. This was a really great presentation and yeah, very inspiring. My question was related to Peter's first question around not being too focused or at least broadening your willingness to work on and be involved in other projects. And I was wondering about how, you would recommend going about doing that. Is that just, I'm a postdoc. Is that just being really receptive to people inviting you to be a part of sitting in on meetings and looking for other opportunities for papers or analyses or projects you can contribute to? Or is that being proactive about seeking out collaborations outside of your primary mentorship team or being proactive in other ways?
I think that it's a mixture of both. I think it has to be a mixture of both, because often you'll find that your team of mentors already are sort of like stuck, in one particular way. They're more mature than you, they're more established, they have a reputation. But I think what I did for myself was to be open to the work that they're doing. So I began with the stigma work. And then I had them speaking about trying to influence the health systems and begin the integration of family planning, HIV and ANC HIV, and I volunteered for it. And then that opened up this whole other opportunities for me by volunteering to be part of those teams which they're working on. But my work on child health required me to step out of my existing collaborations. None of my mentors at that particular time was actually doing anything on child health. So then that forced me then now to step out and look for more collaborators who are in this space. And that's how I actually went in getting collaborators from WHO, from UNICEF, from Gates, just by simply now trying to go a different path. Of course, after some time, I dropped the child health bit. It was a small detour, but I think that the connections you got from there, it's broadened because research ends up being who do you know who can speak
Mm,
about you, who wants to work with you, so the more I think you cast your net out wide, the easier it is. And I've had opportunities, you do go full cycle where I'm in a space where I'm not too comfortable. And then now I reach out to Cohen and tell him, I would like to rope you in into my collaboration because you're the expert in this particular field. So I think it's a mixture of both, being open to what your people are doing, and then also reaching out to people who are not within your mentorship. What do you call it? I don't have the English word. Uh, yeah, you know what I'm saying.
right.
Yeah, thanks
Well,
so much. Really appreciate it.
yeah, thank you, Dr. Onono. So we have just a few more minutes. So I just put in like an article that one of my colleagues forwarded recently, and it's this idea about, so all of us, we know the H index, which is an indicator of like your publication impact. And so I think they're calling for elevating service in academic medicine, and they're proposing S index, which I thought was really interesting and kind of a different way to, look at how we appreciate service in academic medicine. So, Dr. Onono, this might be something that might be of interest to you because I feel like you are, providing a lot of service on many levels.
Mhm.
So, all right. Any last question or comments of appreciation or anything? Um, yep, go ahead. Uh, is it Ramia?
This was just a comment of appreciation, Dr. Onono. That was a really timely and contemporary legacy of advice that you gave us, and it applied to doctors, it applied to epidemiologists. I'm one of them. And every slide had like a great pearl of wisdom, and I found myself trying to screenshot, and then I just gave up at some point because every slide subsequently had better and better advice. So, as someone who's come from a very winding pathway similar to yourself, I wanted to appreciate you. Um, and for taking the time to put all of that together for us and to give us that inspiration, even during shifting times of funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This was great. And this was a, inaugural like career development seminar for this cohort and really appreciate you. And this is being recorded. So Kimberly, are they gonna be able to have the slide deck? It's gonna be uploaded to the recorded site, right?
Yes,
Yes.
I'll send.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
we will be posting it on the website as long as that's okay with Marciana.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay, all right. Any other final comments? And then when's our next, is it next month?
Yes, we have our next works in progress in 2 weeks, same
Oh,
time.
works in progress. Okay,
Yes, we'll look
got it.
forward to that. And then, yeah, career development 2 weeks after that.
Okay, great. And then works in progress, I'm assuming another colleague's gonna moderate?
Yes, Craig will be
Okay,
moderating that one.
okay, okay.
Not you.
Just making sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's great to see you all, and thank you. This was such a wonderful like session. So really appreciate you, Mariciana, and hopefully I'll get to meet you in person.
Yes, yes, hopefully.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
asante. Bye-bye.
Thanks.